Welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're going to be doing our day one recap of the World Junior Championships happening in Ottawa, Ontario. So we'll hop right into it today, starting with the scores from today's games. And we start here with a 5-2 victory for Sweden over Slovakia. And this was a game, sort of an interesting one, right? Where we had Sweden, who was the fairly heavy favorite coming into this one. And then Slovakia, who had a sort of that to-be-determined kind of look to their team. You know, guys like Dalibor Dvorsky, who played great today, I might add. Key part for this game to be so close through and through. But for Slovakia, getting out to an early start, you know, they scored a quick goal. And from there on out for Sweden, you know, kind of on their heels a little bit. You saw it in that first period. But finally, Sweden found their groove second period and starting to sort of find their game that they've been trying to find for the first period especially. So then we sort of seen, you know, Sweden taking advantage there and eventually, you know, 5-2. Late goal really was 5-1 towards the end of this game. Slovakia put in a late one off a bad penalty. And with that, you know, 5-2 is going to be your final here with Sweden beating Slovakia. And that's one, you know, kind of expected. And we'll sort of talk about it today. A lot of games where an expected result, not necessarily the process that you want to see, and we'll get to that in just a second. But for Sweden, you know, finding their groove. I mean, Axel Sandin Pellikka, you know, with the hat trick, 4 points on the day. I think he was up to about 11 shots by the end of it. You know, key player for Sweden's success in this tournament is going to be coming from the guys like Axel Sandin Pellikka. So we'll see if he's able to continue that success moving on. You know, they're playing tomorrow. They got Kazakhstan. Expect another blowout victory, but every goal matters at this tournament, especially when it comes to their semifinal seeding, where you'll probably end up being tied. You want to have to avoid playing teams like Canada or the US. That's going to be a key to Sweden's success here, is being able to find the games, win the right games, play the right way, even when you're playing teams like a Slovakia, like a Switzerland, where you know you're going to win that game, but playing the right way to get in the process when you do play the Czechs. You're ready to go. And I think that's going to be the key to success over the next couple of days for Sweden as they prepare for their December 31st game against Czechia. We'll move it along here, and we talked about the process, and the process for the US of A. The US. Where do we begin? 3-2 at one point. Germany ended up going on the power play after that second goal. You know, this close, right? This close for the entire ship to go off the rails. And it feels like, it's funny, right? Because when you look at the US, probably one of the most skilled teams on paper. But if you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, yes, the definition of insanity. But it truly was insanity in this one. And, you know, time after time after time, the US tried to feed the puck to the middle of the ice against a team that plays the trap style defense, expecting a different result. And what happened? Take a guess, right? Teams that are going to clog the middle of the ice, you're going to try and put it into the middle of the ice. What are you going to do? You're going to put it on their sticks. And that happened time after time after time today, and really didn't look like anything was going to change. And they really never did throughout this game. You know, Germany played exactly as Germany's supposed to, and they nearly could have taken this game. Obviously, the end score 10-4. You know, it wasn't ideal, but at the same time, you know, this game was not what it looks like on paper. The US did not play as they're supposed to. Because if you do that against a team like a Finland, where Finland is going to be able to finish those chances, pun intended, you know, you got to be real careful if you're the US playing against better teams. And one of the biggest things, my takeaways from today's game is that, you know, the Germans played a really good game today because they were down in the corner, fighting the US, and the one thing that really was my biggest takeaway from the US's game today is that they were very limited in their ability to play the physical game, where you see teams like Canada, you see teams like Sweden playing so well in. It's dangerous for this US team if they're unable to, you know, put together that physicality, because if they play anything like they did against Germany today, they're going to have some problems in this tournament. So even a team like Finland, I might add as well, where they're going to play physical in the corners. The U.S. really struggled with that today. So just something to keep an eye on here over the next couple of days. You know, the end result 10-4. I think the U.S. will be fine after that win in the scorebook. But some red flags coming out of that game is one thing I will say to keep an eye on there. Moving along to the third game of the day now between the Czechs and the Swiss. This was a 5-1 victory, and it was a fairly even game, but we sort of saw it, right, where the Czechs just had that extra skill to really put this one away. You look at your star players to really perform. I will also mention that the Czech goalie today, Hrebel, was outstanding again. He's a guy who I really think for the Czechs, if they want to make it far in this tournament, he's going to have to be their backbone. And really, overall, it was a pretty good day for the goaltenders, of course, minus that Germany game. Trey Augustine in a couple, but at the same time, pretty good games both ways. But overall, this game sort of settled by the star power of the Czechs. They finished their chances, unlike the Swiss, who sort of had a little bit of problems with that. But at the same time, both teams looked pretty good today. No real problems with either of their games. The Czechs were just the better team in this one. In my eyes, that's why they won. They have more skill, as they should, and they won today. 5-1 was your final. And then to our game of the day, with Canada beating Finland 4-0. And this game was quite the game, I will add. Both games today at the Canadian Tire Center, which we were on site for, were really good games. You had the U.S. one, which was nice and close, all up until basically the back half of that second period, and then the floodgates started to open. But at the same time, for for the Canada one today, another great game. 4-0 was your final. You look to your star players to really sort of make that mark. You guys look at guys like Gavin McKenna and Easton Cowan, and what do they do when the moments shine brightest? They score goals, and that's exactly what Canada needs here to really do well in this tournament. Today it was no different. Backstop by Carter George for the shutout. This is exactly what the Canadian team needs to do here. And as well, on home ice. You think back to last year. I will say this is that this Canada team is different this year. They're scary. They have the ability to put the puck in the net. We don't have to talk about the power play. That one was a little bit scary. But this Canadian team is back, and that second period for me was one of the biggest sort of changes we've seen. Think back to last year. They didn't quite get their way in the first as they did in this game. The trick is how do they respond in the second. And today's second period was outstanding from the Canadians. In my eyes, was really a fresh sight to see, and it sort of reminds me of those teams of old, where they might not have a great period, but that next period they're going to come back harder than ever. And this one they really did, especially on home ice. You want to see sort of how they interact with the crowd. They looked a little shaky to start, but you're also on home ice in front of a pretty large crowd in Ottawa. So, stuff to go on there. As for the Finns in my eyes played a pretty good game today. Score wasn't really indicative of how they played. They basically, from that last sort of 10-15 minutes in the third onwards, the Finns were the better team in this game, but at the end of the day, 4-0 victory for Canada. They take it on home ice, winning their first game, a crucial win, and a decisive one at that. And I think as you look towards this tournament, those are the kind of wins that you're going to look back on and build that confidence for the eventual, winner of Group A game when they play the U.S. on New Year's Eve. So we'll see sort of what goes on there, but at the same time, big win for Canada today. They take it 4-0. As we move on to the news from today, Axel Sandin Pellikka equals GOAT. I think that's what a lot of Swedish fans are saying now. Remember, three goals, 4 points, exactly what you need from him. He's not necessarily going to be Sweden's main scorer, but he's going to be probably one of the better players at this tournament. Heavily relied upon in my eyes for the Swedes. He'll have to continue that. For the Swedes to do well in this tournament, especially when they play tough matchups, whether that be the Czechs on the 31st, whether that be in the playoffs with teams against, like when you have to play Canada or the U.S., those are the kind of guys you got to see shine brightest. And I think that's where Sandy Pellikka is really going to meet his match there. But until then, great game from him today. Move on to the second one with the Slovaks, with Slovak of old. And this was a team, the goaltending today was outstanding from the Slovaks. And I think, we think back to the last couple of years. Why have the Slovakians been so successful? It's because of their goaltending, right? And whether or not the Slovaks are going to be a contender in this, probably not. But at the same time, they can have some good goaltending. Think back to Adam Gajan, Simon Lactosi the couple of years before that. Those are the guys you look to really backstop your team, and that's the key to success for the Slovakian team is have good goaltending, play trap style like they did against the Swedes today, and capitalize on your chances. Like a guy like Dalibor Dvorsky. Those are the guys you need to have going in order to be successful. And I have no reason why this Slovak team can't do well in this tournament. I think one of the things that I know a lot of people had was Switzerland over Slovakia, and today, after seeing the games, I have to say I don't see a world where Switzerland loses or beats the Slovak team, especially on paper. But with that in mind, we'll move on here with the U.S. And that one was the middle. I can't even count the amount of times that they fed the puck into the middle of the ice, right onto a German stick for the U.S., just fixing sort of minor problems and not doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. When you know full well that there is a German player right there who's going to clog up that middle, play down low, be able to play that physical game is going to be the key. Because when you play teams like Canada or you play teams like Finland, you're going to have some problems trying to work the middle of the ice. You have to make sure you're able to play all ends of the ice, including down below the goal line, because that's where you're going to be most successful. As for the Germans, it's a trap. Yes, another Star Wars pun. If you are new here, well, welcome to it. There's going to be a lot of them throughout this tournament. But, for the Germans, a very solid game today. Played exactly how they needed to. It's a tough U.S. team. The end score, in my eyes, isn't indicative of how they played. The key to success for Germany in this tournament is playing their game. They're not trying to win the next, they'll try and win, but their main goal is to beat on the 30th against Latvia. That's their key to success in this one. If they can beat the Latvians, which in my eyes, after seeing today, we'll see Latvia tomorrow. If they can play anything like they did today against the U.S., they're poised to do well in this tournament. To the Czechs, the power, just that skill alone, it has really set them over the edge, especially in their matchup against the Swiss today. We'll see them in action at some point on the 31st against the Swedes, and I think that'll be their first sort of real test at this tournament. But until then, I think it'll be real solid games. The one I'm very excited for is Czechs and Slovaks. As always, that sort of tends to come down to their goaltending, and I think it will be a really good game with both teams sort of playing similar styles. It will be pretty interesting. As for the Swiss, they were cheesed today. They lost, but for the Swiss, tough loss today. Played well, and at the same time, not to take anything away, but just weren't able to have that skill power matchup against the Czechs. Was really the end-determiner here. But for the Swiss, a good game today, just an unfortunate outcome. And then we are down to Canada, which means we are so back. Welcome back to the World Juniors. As obviously last year, a tough loss against the Czechs. This year, it's a brand new year. It's on home turf. Home ice, what more could you really ask for? And the last one here with Finland, with the ups and the downs. Finland played a good game today. Unfortunately, just couldn't find the back of the net. They had plenty of chances and really tilted the ice towards the end of that third period. And it had me worried at one point because, the one problem with the Finns, you can't let them stay in the game. You got to take them out because otherwise they just start clawing back. And that's exactly what they did today. Just unfortunately, Carter George was up to the task, which means Canada wins 4-0. So whoop-de-doo, home crowd and leaves home happy. But now we'll flip it over to the standings. So in first place, sort of first and second, the U.S. and Canada in Group A. Latvia yet to play. Germany and Finland coming up the rear. In Group B, we have Sweden and Czechia, both in first place with 3 points. And then third place, obviously, Kazakhstan has not played yet today. And then Switzerland and Slovakia with 1 regulation loss each. So not too much to talk about here yet today. Obviously, as the tournament progresses, we'll have more. But we'll move over now to the schedule for tomorrow. And we got ourselves probably one of the better games we'll see at this tournament coming up. The very first game of the day at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Slovakia against Switzerland. And this is a game that I think a lot of people, including myself, have had circled. This is one of those games that really could go either way. It's going to come down to who brings their game. And I think, obviously it's a prediction. But in my eyes, I'm taking the Slovaks here. I know it's a very good argument to take the Swiss too. But in my eyes, the Slovaks just look that much better. Even looking at their games today, it's tough to go up against a good Swedish team and the Slovaks were right there with them the entire game, 5-1, ended up putting a late goal for 5-2, but really sort of pushing and having a shot throughout the entire game. It was very interesting to me to see how the Slovaks played. I think they'll play pretty well against the Swiss. And similar to the Swiss, the Swiss are a team that plays very similarly to the Slovaks, where they kind of just hang around a little bit. We saw that today in that Czech game. So if you can take them out early, that's going to be the key to success for both these teams here, is take them out early, don't let them come back in the game, and we'll see sort of how this game progresses. But 1 o'clock, Slovak-Swiss, going to be a good one. The second game of the day will be, if you ever want to see the sort of the clips we're sending out on Twitter, it's on the fly 15:15, and we'll obviously have some sort of live updates there. But 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time between Germany and Finland, and this is one of those games that, I have to be realistic here and say that I'm taking Finland by a long margin, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if Germany makes this game a lot closer than it should be. Think back to last year where they beat them. No one had that on their bingo card, yet, the Finns lost to Germany for the first time in however many years. I don't think it'll be a repeat of that this year, but you really never know. If Germany can play the way they did against the US, at the very least, it'll be a tough matchup. So definitely something to keep in mind there. Third game of the day is Sweden and Kazakhstan at 5 o'clock. Yep. Fourth game of the day, 7:30, Canada and Latvia. Very similarly, I expect both games, Kazakhstan and Sweden and Canada and Latvia, to be blowouts. But at the same time, you really can't count any team out of this tournament, because stuff like the US and stuff like Germany happens in a day, and you get scared sometimes. So expecting blowouts for the last 3 games. Switzerland and Slovakia is going to be the marquee matchup of the day. Keep an eye on that one. That one's going to be a really good game. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you really like, consider subscribing. Tell all your friends down below your thoughts on day 1 of the World Junior Championship. Until next time, see you.